Good afternoon to everyone here today. Thank you for joining our Power Initiative webinar, part of our series in response to the COVID situation. Today we're holding our webinar in collaboration with YAL, Young Arab Leaders, and it's the third in a series of strategic webinars we are holding with them. YAL have been our partners since 2018, and we have worked extensively and closely together over the past few years, so we'd like to thank them for our ongoing support. Today's session will be on survivorship bias, lessons from failure, and the path beyond. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Power Initiative is the leading and only independent non-profit organisation founded to promote the business case for the implementation of the highest standards in corporate governance, transparency and accountability across the Gulf region's private sector. Launched in 2010 in cooperation with the United Nations Office of Partnerships, the Power Initiative aims to convene businesses, decision makers and future young leaders to take the lead in promoting and adopting greater governance standards. The Power Initiative also engages with the wider business ecosystem in the Gulf region, collaborating with over 30 regional universities and partnering with over 40 companies to collectively drive our mission forward. We work as a think tank and build data by publishing cutting-edge research reports and case studies to inspire business change. Program today, the webinar today is being held as part of our Governance and SMEs program. The micro, small and medium-sized enterprises are considered the backbone of the regional economy. They account for between 80% and 90% of registered companies across the region, but their contribution to regional GDP remains low. As SMEs compete with each other in a saturated marketplace and strive to be both innovative and fiscally sustainable, they must understand the fact that implementing corporate governance is the key to facilitating their growth and success. The Power Initiative understands the necessity of good governance for small business success, and in 2017 we launched the Governance and SME program to engage small businesses on the importance of corporate governance for positive economic outcomes. Good governance is flexible and can be modified to fit a business's needs. It is not meant solely for the realm of multinationals or large corporations, as is often thought to be the case. SMEs will find that applying governance policies and practices will help them build a stronger, more resilient and more profitable business than before. About today's webinar, we are pleased to have this webinar to discuss the reasons why MSMEs fail and to learn how common SME mistakes can be avoided for business success in the future. Contemporary discussions around supporting MSMEs and educating them on the market risks come from analyses of success stories in the small business realm. What is missing from these conventional conversations is an analysis of why more MSMEs fail than succeed, and what lessons can be imparted from failure to create a culture of strategic planning and prudence for SMEs to prosper. This webinar then aims to explain the concept of survivorship bias and contextualise it in the business world, discuss case studies or stories of failures within SMEs, or the most common reasons SMEs fail, and derive strategic lessons from past failures to help SMEs, both established and new, to create a roadmap that can prevent similar failures and pitfalls. As I mentioned, we are collaborating with Young Arab Leaders on this webinar series. YAL is a not-for-profit organisation founded during the World Economic Forum in 2004 under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai. YAL seeks to leverage the capabilities and expertise of its strong regional network of members in order to catalyse the entrepreneurial and professional development of the next generation of leaders. Its mission and vision is to empower the next generation of leaders in the Arab world by developing a strong network of industry and business leaders to serve as mentors and role models to youth and entrepreneurs across the region. It does so by fostering entrepreneurship and innovation and creating a hub for new businesses and investment opportunities. YAL has a mentors and advisors network, is engaged in community initiatives such as entrepreneurship workshop series, a mentorship program and weekend competitions, and has a vast support network. Once again, thanks to YAL for their ongoing support and partnership. About the speaker today, we are pleased to welcome Ms. Reem Al-Houni, YAL member and CEO and founder of TI22 Film Dubai On Demand. Reem trained in the BBC and worked her way up the ladder, primarily working on the production of corporate films, TV commercials, webcasts and events. She moved to Dubai in 2007 where she was catapulted back into the broadcasting world. Reem launched her own production company, TI22 Films, in January 2011, servicing both corporates and broadcasters. As Reem believes the future of the media industry is in online content, in 2014, Reem founded Dubai On Demand, an online presenter-led lifestyle channel featuring a host of well-known Dubai personalities where the world of branded content and influence and marketing collide. Reem has served on the jury of the New York Festival Television and Film Awards for 7 years and is regularly called to speak at events. She also supports organizations as a media consultant and video strategist and runs both in-house and public workshops to support entities with their video strategy. Reem, welcome. Thank you once again for giving up your time and contributing to this webinar today and leading it for us. We look forward to hearing from your strategic insights. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I'd like to start off by thanking both Young Arab Leaders and the Pearl Initiative for the opportunity. I guess let's get straight into it. So the topic I've been given is to share lessons from failure and the paths beyond. Why more SMEs fail than succeed, some stories of failure, what lessons can be imparted from the failure, and to help create a roadmap. So I should start by claiming that I'm not an expert in these areas, but by sharing some of my stories, hopefully others on this webinar will benefit. So you've all just heard my profile, and some of you may be thinking, that doesn't sound like someone who's failed. We've won over 25 international awards, New York Festival, Cannes Awards. I've been in the industry over 20 years, quite an extensive profile with a lot of high caliber brands and government entities as clients. But why do you think that I wouldn't have failed? This often comes up in my world because I believe perception is reality. People only know what they see or what you show them. And this can work both for you and against you. Today, with some of my stories, hopefully I'll show you how this has worked both for me and against me through the different business ventures I've taken on. As it stands, more SMEs fail than succeed. That's what the statistics say. Bloomberg states 8 out of 10 businesses fail in their first year. That is 80%. However, there don't seem to be as clear statistics in the MENA region, but one thing is for sure is that we don't seem to hear about the companies that fail. Why do you think that is? Any ideas? I'd love to see your comments. You can put them in the Q&A box. I'd be curious to see what thoughts you may have as to why we don't hear about more failures in the region. Well, I could tell you why I think that's the case, and I think it's because of cultural perception. Is it the Arab mentality? With Arab households in general, your business is private, and that includes your failures. In other parts of the world, you see that the most common reaction after the failure of a business in the American continent is to go back to education. In Europe, they tend to look for a therapist. But in our part of the world, it's about keeping it quiet. I think it's a general understanding of how business works these days. I always think back to when I was starting to buy on demand in 2014, and I was told crowdfunding was a way to go, and I was looking at Kickstarter. And I remember having a conversation with my family, and firstly, my parents had no concept or understanding of what crowdfunding meant. So I had to explain to them that, people contributed and actually helped you fund your project. And the instant thing my mother said is, Yani shahata. So for those who don't speak Arabic, she said, oh, so you mean like begging? So her understanding of crowdfunding was that you were begging people, and that just seemed very, very wrong. Let alone the emphasis we put on social media to help us promote our businesses. Whenever I was to post anything, I'd get, family saying, Hayatuk Ain, which again for the English speakers means, it's an evil eye. So cultural perception plays a big part, even in the day-to-day workings in any business. Thank you to those of you who put in some suggestions. You said lack of scenario planning is a possibility. Lack of clear strategies. Lack of planning has come up 2-3 times. I agree there probably is a lack of planning, but for me, I feel that a cultural perception has played a part in why people don't share their failings. So we have to change our perception of failure. So according to legend, I think most people know this story, but Thomas Edison took 1,000 tries to invent the light bulb. And when he was asked, how did it feel to fail 999 times, his response was, I haven't failed. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps. Great success is built on failure, frustration, even catastrophe. So based on this, I have failed a lot. Or have I? I personally don't feel that way. I think each of your failures is another step towards your success. And I think this is an important lesson for all of us to keep in mind. But remember, a big part of that is the personality traits that you have. So in order for him to have tried 999 times and go to that 1,000th time, he had to have the persistence. And I see too many people giving up too early. So I think the ability to learn from your mistakes, believe the success is in reach, and keep trying is really important. Henry Ford says the failure is the opportunity to try again more intelligently. So one thing that I know has helped me over the years is really working on my mindset and ensuring that I believe in a positive mindset to keep going towards the next stage. So why do SMEs fail? There are a whole bunch of reasons why, and you've probably read up on different articles and journals and studies. But one study that appealed to me was by Bill Gross, who started Idea Lab. He did a study and looked at 200 businesses and looked at the factors that accounted most for a company's success and failure. And he looked at 5 variables. The 5 variables he looked at were ideas, how original was it? The team, how capable are they at executing? The business model, the funding, the cash flow that they have, and the timing. Is it too early or maybe it's too late? There are too many competitors. And I'm just curious to know, for everyone here, we're about to have a poll. I'd like to know, out of these 5 areas, which do you think is the main reason why SMEs fail, or what he discovered in his study? So I'm going to give you a minute and a half, a minute or so, to just select from the 5 options on the poll which one you think was the biggest factor that contributed to failure. I'm just going to give you another 30 seconds to just put your answers into the poll. Right, so let's take a look at the results of the poll. Okay, so what we can see is 17% of our group today think it's ideas, 26 team, 30% business model, 17 funding, and the lowest is 8% timing. So the majority of the people on our webinar today believe it's the business model that has led to failure. Well, you might be surprised to find out that actually, according to the study conducted, it was timing. So execution matters a lot, but timing might matter even more. So that's fascinating, because that was actually the lowest in the poll that we've just conducted on our webinar today. I'm going to ask a second poll question. Now that we know that it was timing, by what percentage do you think companies failed because of their timing? What percentage? And if I can ask you to take a look at the second poll, what percentage do you think that timing exceeds the other factors as a reason for failure? I'll give you another minute and a half to put in your answers. "30 seconds just for the last few people. Okay, let's take a look at the results of our poll today on the webinar. So we have the majority of people think, okay, more than 50%, 34% of you think more than 50%. So let's scroll back and have a look at what the study actually showed us. The study actually showed that 42% of companies failed due to timing of their business. So that I find really interesting because it's not always what we think. And why is that relevant right now? That's relevant right now because of the time that we're in. Is it a time of crisis or is it a time of opportunity? Is now an opportunity for you to actually take advantage of the time that we're in? I refer to a quote by Sam Walton in the US. He said, when he was asked, what do you think about recession? He responded, I decided not to participate. So it is your time to decide whether you are participating or not in the crisis that we're in. Especially given that we all have more time on our hands right now to reflect, reconsider our choices. We can move faster with new ideas, have more productive meetings with more people, reconnect with people. So all of this allows us to turn a period of time that most people perceive as a failure and a loss for their businesses into a success. Not to mention that there are a number of businesses, well-known international businesses, that have actually launched or thrived in a crisis, you know, as big as IBM, Disney, but even more recently, Facebook, Salesforce, Google. So, you know, who knows whether this might be the perfect time for you to launch. In fact, you know, given that I'm in the media world, I'm aware, maybe some of you are aware of Quibi that launched just last week. It's a content platform on mobile devices, and in their first week they had over 1 million downloads. That's launched during a crisis. So again, it's about timing. So I wanted to go through my case studies for you today, but before I tell you that, I want you to imagine the kind of personality who's ambitious, fairly organized, always been a hard worker, a learner, a reader. That's the type of person I grew up to be. And so as a result, I'm, you know, in a situation where I'm constantly seeing opportunities, and they don't always work out, but I think I'm going to talk you through a couple, and hopefully there'll be some learnings for everybody. The first dates back to 2011. I happened to be on a business trip in the US, and I came across bamboo clothes. In fact, I came across the fabric. My hand happened to touch a t-shirt, and it just felt like the softest material known to man. I walked in and found out it was bamboo. I learned all about the properties. It was antibacterial, it was thermoregulating, it kept you cool in the heat, it wicks away moisture, amazing properties. I came back to the UAE, and in 2011, I couldn't find bamboo clothing anywhere. Which seemed a shame given that we live in a very hot climate, and it seemed like the perfect fabric for that. I actually initially looked at franchising a bamboo company in the US when it dawned on me that it was a very expensive venture, and why would I franchise something that no one had heard about? Maybe I should just start on my own. So a decision was actually made for me to start a business with a very close friend of mine. We brainstormed a few names, and Bamboutique was born. And of course, this is a legitimate business. So what do all people who have a legitimate business do? They go out and they register a trade license. Within a couple of months, we'd launched our brand, logo, social media pages. We did all the research on the product and materials. We had our samples, we manufactured the fabric, designed outfits, and we were out there, we were marketing. So yeah, it was a very intense period of time, very obsessively focused on getting this product into the market. The first lesson I would share from my failures is to test your idea before spending. So it sounds obvious, but yeah, it's not when you're in it. And one example that always stuck with me is one of my favorite books is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And I remember when I first read that, it was actually the book that motivated me to become an entrepreneur and leave full-time employment. But I remember reading this one specific passage where Tim Ferriss mentioned that he happened to be passionate about cars and a specific model of car, and he knew everything about how to service that car. And he thought there must be other people out there who would want that information. So he put a newspaper article or newspaper ad out saying that there was a manual available which had the A to Z knowledge information about the specific model of vehicle, and the manual was being sold for $100. And he put the newspaper ad out, and within a few days, he had 2 purchases, 2 buyers. What is interesting about this story is that he put the ad in the paper before he'd actually written the manual. So when he actually got those 2 orders, that's when he reached out to those customers and said, "Thank you so much for ordering. I'm currently in the middle of writing an updated version of the manual, which will be ready in 30 days. Would you be happy to wait 30 days to receive the updated version, or you can get your money back?" Both of those customers were happy to wait the 30 days, and that gave him enough time to write the manual. So that story actually stuck with me because I feel that nowadays it's so much easier in the world of social media to test an idea. If you have an idea for a product, a service, an offer, it's as simple as putting a post out, a poll out, a mailer, and see what feedback you get from the market first. If you start getting people bite and there's genuine interest, that's when you can consider spending. But in many cases, you see the spending happen before actually validating the idea, and there are so many easy ways to do that these days. So yes, testing your idea before spending. The second lesson is to choose your partners carefully. So you hear a lot of stories about working with friends and family, and I made a decision to work with a best friend, and the challenges in that is we both had full-time jobs. When I say full-time jobs, I already had a business when I started BAM Boutique, which was my core business, TI22 Films. And I had to sustain that because that's ultimately what was funding my livelihood and funding this business. So, we had other priorities. My partner also was starting a family, which brings its own time challenges. Very hard to keep each other accountable. And the biggest of all, we did not put our agreement in writing. And it's funny because you hear these stories and you think, oh, that won't happen to me. And I actually have several memories of when I thought, this we should put something down. But just as quickly as that thought entered my head, just as quickly as it escaped. And I'm sad to say that it was a very difficult end to the business and the friendship that isn't there anymore. Purely because we disagreed at the end, which could have been resolved at the start. So one of my key learnings is choosing your partners carefully, but putting everything in writing. The fourth element that I would go to is getting the knowledge that you need. So what do I mean by that? So I happened to move into an industry I genuinely knew nothing about. My whole background, all my experience, my awards, my knowledge is in the media industry, not in the fashion industry. In fact, most people who know me will probably think I'm one of the least fashionable people you'll ever come across. But I genuinely saw an opportunity because of the fabric. But having no prior knowledge of the industry meant that we were prone to making some very silly mistakes. And just to give you one example, we were so excited when we had our first outfits. Imagine we'd had the fabric manufactured, it had been shipped, it had arrived, we designed these outfits, we'd seen the finished product, and my partner, she wore an outfit, looked great, she washed it. Next day I get a phone call, and she says, "It's shrunk." What do you mean it's shrunk? She's like, "I'm telling you, it fit me yesterday, it doesn't fit me today, it's shrunk." So I rang the manufacturer, and the first thing he said to me was, "But you didn't ask for it to be pre-shrunk." And I don't think I'll ever forget that, because Firstly, you don't know what you don't know. How was I to know that that was a request I should have made at that time? And the importance of understanding the industry, which could have saved us quite a fortune at that time. Being able to source the right suppliers. And then in our case, we went into an eco-friendly business, which brought along its own set of challenges. Were we using vegetable dye? How are we thinking about our packaging and our shipping? Are all of the right, eco-friendly measures being taken? So that was yet another hurdle for us to consider, which would have been so much easier had we found someone who had the industry knowledge to join us. Simplicity is sometimes best. So we started off our business with the view that we were only going to do t-shirts because that was the simplest thing. However, we were attending a lot of markets, and we would react every time a customer would come up and say, oh, you really should do baby wear. We would come out with a baby line. This fabric would be amazing for maternity wear. Great. Next thing you know, there's a maternity outfit. Oh, it's so soft. This would really work well for yoga wear. So within a few months, we had over 50 SKUs, which in itself brought a whole level of challenges, whether it's sizes and colors and storage and inventory, and which really, wasn't required at that stage in our business. Not to mention the fact, when you start out small, you test and you go to different events and markets, which is what we were doing. And the first thing everyone would say was, are you online? And we're like, no, we just come to these markets. Well, you need to be online. So what did we do? We went and invested in a fully fledged website, which, great inventory system. Then the next thing people would say was like, oh, but we don't want to buy online. Do you have a physical store? So it just felt like we were always needing to go to the next level. It was difficult to give customers what they wanted. I would say try not to educate a market. So the only people we sold to were people who had met us or bought from us in person. So imagine, after all of our investment into this website, why weren't people buying? Because no one knew what bamboo clothes were, or how they felt, or the benefits. So it really felt like we had a tough time educating people just on the product that we had, let alone getting to a point where we could sell it. And obviously, if you don't have sales, then you don't have a business. Having said that, it was very tricky because we had lots of exciting moments. When you're selling in person, you get great reactions, amazing customer testimonials, let alone great PR. We were in newspapers, we were on radio, we were invited to events. So, on the face of it, the perception of our business was that it was successful and it was doing something new. And there really wasn't anyone here at the time focusing on eco-friendly clothing, let alone bamboo clothing. So it was very new. But the reality was that, we didn't have the sales. Meanwhile, we're paying for trade license, for staff, half of our time, no sales, and we ultimately had to close the business in 2014. So a lot of learnings out of that experience, 2011 to 2014. But what I would say is check it's the right time for your product. And coming back to the survey that we started off with, and it's interesting for me when we find that the study brought timing as the main reason for failure, because I really do feel that in this case. Could 2020 be the year for Bamboutique? Maybe. People finally understand the benefits of eco-friendly clothing. More people are used to buying bamboo clothes. It can be tested easily through social media. We're all sitting at home. E-commerce is on the rise. So why not? So I'm looking at rebuilding the website now. So that's what I mean by, looking for the right time. And as far as I'm concerned, I didn't fail with this business. I just figured out how not to do it. So it's still a great idea. It still has potential. And now it's about figuring out what the right steps are. And who knows, it may be the time for Bamboutique is yet to come. So that's just one of my case studies that I wanted to go through. A second different case study is, I seem to have, yeah. Second case study is Dubai on Demand, which, so I am someone who learns a lot. I study a lot. I go to conferences around the world, and I have a lot of knowledge that I then want to impart here. And at that time, in 2014, there was a huge growth in online content in the US and in the UK and the Western world in general. And I really felt the need for an online, a surge in online content here in the Middle East, specifically in the UAE. And in 2014, something else I believe in is in science, and a group of my ex-colleagues who worked for Dubai Media were all made redundant. So I took that opportunity, and I think within 24 hours of them being made redundant, I contacted them all and I just said, look, I'm really sorry to hear your news, but I have an opportunity. Would you like to hear more? And fortunately, they did, and 9 of them were very interested in starting a YouTube channel focused on niche programming. So in this case, I decided to start with a group of ex-colleagues. I learned from my mistakes, and the first thing I did was have everyone sign an agreement. So the first thing I said to the group is, I love you all, know you all. Friendship is one thing, but business is another. And I can't move forward until we've all signed this agreement. And guess what? Everyone did. So it's purely about being comfortable to have that conversation at the start of the journey. Secondly, the activity of the business fell within my existing trade license, so I didn't have to spend more there. 90% of the team put their efforts in for free because we all wanted to see it work. It was an industry I really understood, unlike my previous experience with bamboo. And it felt like an opportunity to see. So we did it, and we launched 2014. So talking about checking if it's the right time for your product, it really felt like it was, because we were launching at a time where YouTube penetration was the highest in the world in the MENA region. It still is to this day, mainly due to Saudi Arabia's consumption, but also mobile phone penetration was at an all-time high in MENA. So it made sense for us to be creating more content for an online platform. What I would say is, don't underestimate the power of PR. Through our connections and our experience, we successfully secured a press conference at the Dubai International Film Festival to launch Dubai on Demand. So you can imagine the number of journalists and media that we managed to secure, who then all wrote about us. So it resulted in a large amount of press coverage. And with that, it resulted in a larger number of inquiries. So, we were sitting there thinking, this is great. People really do want what we're offering. What I would say is to make sure that your communication is clear in all of the PR that you get, because what was happening was, whilst we were getting all of these inquiries, we'd go and meet a brand, and they didn't understand that we were a YouTube channel. They all thought we were a TV channel. Our launch was so spectacular that brands thought we were a large established channel already in the market with a large reach. The minute they realized that we had just launched, we were on YouTube, we were, starting out, we lost their interest almost straight away. So you can imagine how, exciting it was for 2-3 weeks, and then how deflating it was to realize that all that interest you thought you had generated was actually not for what you were currently offering. Similarly, we had interest from investors at that point, and then when they realized just how early we were, that interest fizzled as well. So what did we do? We had to find ways of earning, ways to sustain, and we were able to find paying customers. Not where we thought. We got them from international brands who were coming into the UAE, because it was important for us to support the whole venture. But what I would say is that totally shifted our objectives. So we were no longer focused on growing a content-driven channel with great shows and great personalities and growing an audience. We were more driven by the brands and who would pay, and that ultimately jeopardized our overall product. In the meantime, I was trying very hard to raise funding, and that proved to be a full-time job in itself. So it was ultimately a very difficult period, just trying to keep something running, which again, to the outside world, looked like an amazing channel with some very well-known faces, and, you know, press conferences at DIF and big launches. So another example where perception is reality. What I would say, something that helped me tremendously during that time, is being resourceful. And what do I mean by that? Like, have a look at your network, have a look at the people around you, and see how they can support you in your business. So I was very fortunate to sustain things with a group of friends, suppliers, and service providers who we had everything from our branding to our social media to our events bartered. Which isn't easy to do. It sounds easy, but it really isn't. You know, trying to convince everyone that you're worth aligning with and just doing your best to make it a win-win scenario. So being resourceful is definitely something I've learned through this process, to make the most out of nothing. And after 2 years of trying very hard to sustain things, I'd used my personal savings, and for the first time in my life had a loan. It was not sustainable, and we had to stop. And it was time for me to regroup, focus back on sales for the business I did have, because TI22 Films was running the whole time during these ventures, and try and aim for some stability. I don't consider this a failure, but again, more steps I've taken that bring us to today. So always be pivoting. You hear that a lot, and I strongly believe it, because the Buy on Demand has had quite the journey. As I mentioned, it started in 2014. I struggled with the end of 2014. I struggled with it for 2 years, trying to just keep it alive. But then 2018, you know, it seemed that online viewing was on the rise again in MENA, and the UAE decided to introduce influencer licenses to regulate content production on social media. So this seemed like the perfect time to pivot. We relaunched the Buy on Demand June 2018. And with that, we became licensed with our influencer license, and we were now in a new space where we were helping content creators create shows online. So it had evolved slightly. In 2019, we pivoted again because of two reasons. One, I realized that the online marketplace was not just for influencers and content creators, but actually it was for business people, owners, thought leaders, experts, people who wanted to position themselves as specialists. And, you know, that's a space I do understand very well. So we created membership packages for them, which is what we still offer, which is membership packages for thought leaders to keep them creating regular content online. That was our pivot in 2019. And honestly, right now during Corona, 2020 sees us pivoting again. Whilst we still have our thought leaders active, we've come up with a whole new range of packages, do-it-yourself packages for people to create content from home, consulting packages which allow us to have Zoom meetings and actually get people started with their content plans and creating those plans for them. I'm not sure we would have done this recent pivot had it not been for the crisis we're in now. And believe it or not, we've had a number of clients sign up with us in the last few weeks for these new packages, which just goes that we are addressing the need of the market right now. So the way I feel is it could be seen as a story of failures, but honestly, 2020 feels very much like the year of the Buy on Demand. So with that, I would also say keep believing and never give up, because it is not always easy to stay positive. It is not always easy to, take failure after failure and keep going. But a big part of that is your mindset. A big part of that is the people around you. A big part of it is cutting out the negativity. I know for a lot of people this sounds very wishy-washy, but honestly, it makes a very big difference to your mental state and your ability to move forward and keep persisting. If you want to be like Edison and get to not just 999, but get to that 1,000th time and succeed. So with everything, what I always say is have faith. And a few bonus lessons. I say hustle on the weekend, both whether it's Bamboutique or Dubai on Demand or any other venture I'm working on. It's there aren't enough hours in the day. It might feel like it right now whilst we're all at home, but it's about how you use those hours. So I used to finish TI-22 Films work on a Thursday evening, and then Thursday night I'd be packing all of my clothes and labeling and, ready to go to a market on Friday morning to sell my Bamboutique clothes. And Dubai on Demand was very similar. And in fact, all of my other ventures are. It's filling your weekend hours, your night hours to move forward with these projects. Learn and read as much as possible. The number of ideas and information and inspiration just from what other people have achieved, looking at what is happening in other parts of the world, especially now. Now is a great time to see what other markets are doing. There's also a huge value to visibility. It helps you tell your story and be perceived how you want to be. So in this particular area, I feel we've done quite well. We tend to get the right PR, tell the right story. But as hopefully I've shared or shown, that can have difficult consequences as well if you're not ready for the results. Always be building your network and support them wherever you can. Something that has helped me tremendously is my network and support system of business owners. I happen to be a member of a networking organization called Business Network International. I've been a member for 9 years, and it's a community which has really helped me grow and have access to resources I may not have had otherwise. I'm also very grateful to young Arab leaders who've also supported me on this particular webinar, but have given me a number of other visibility opportunities where, so it all pays off to build your networks. And tell your story. You never know what resonates with who and who can help. And this comes back to what I started with in terms of the Arab mindset and the Arab perception, where we learn from childhood to not say anything and aib and, it's wrong. But, the more I've spoken to people and the more I've shared, the more solutions have come my way. So I'm a big advocate for sharing. So with that, I would like to thank young Arab leaders for the opportunity and the Pearl Initiative for the opportunity today. As I said, I'm not an expert. I just wanted to share my stories and case studies and hope that something resonates with you and there are some learnings from my failures that can help with the path ahead. And I would like to move over to any questions that anyone may have at this stage. So please feel free to type in your questions into the Q&A bar, and I will see what I can do about responding. Okay. Okay, Rekha from In5. Hi, Rekha. Hope you're well. She's asked to advise on some book titles that could be a good reading to keep you positive and keep you updated with entrepreneurship and also be vocal. So book titles. So at the moment, believe it or not, I'm rereading Think and Grow Rich. So it's a classic, Napoleon Hill, but it really does a lot for your mindset and the law of attraction and thinking positive and believing that you will succeed. So for me, Think and Grow Rich is one I'm currently rereading right now. And I just finished Tony Robbins' Unlimited Power. That's another one, just focusing on your goals, focusing on just really visualizing what you want and each step on how to get it. So both of those, I think, are more mindset driven, but they would be two that I'd go to. And I think on a more general, like I'm a big believer in things like the Rockefeller Habits. So Vern Harnish is a great one to read, which just gives some systems, and the E-Myth as well. E-Myth is great when you just need to organize, especially when you're just starting out, because I think the one thing that really resonates with me in that book is that, everyone thinks they're an entrepreneur, but actually all that's happened is they've had an entrepreneurial moment, and then they go back to the operator that they are. So I would say those are hopefully a few books that I would recommend. Abdul Rashid, excellent new concepts. When will the next session be? I believe Pearl Initiative have sessions. They'll update you on the next one. I know the next speaker, Lucy Chow, she's awesome. And she's someone who actually is a Dubai on Demand member, and we do all of her videos right now. So I would definitely tune in for Lucy. She's got some excellent tips. Is Bamboutique still running? Fabulous question. So I'm in the process of resuscitating it because I believe that, we haven't ended the journey. So inshallah, in the coming weeks, that website will be up and running and everything will be back on track. Just going through some of your questions. Okay, Muhammad Al-Kindi from Abu Dhabi University. How did you overcome the regulation? How hard or easy was it to enter the market? So it depends on which business you're talking about. I think I am someone who believes everything is easy. It's just about figuring out how. So with TI-22 films and with Dubai on Demand, it was easy to start the businesses. What's not easy is getting the customers. And I think that is a whole different, different ball game in terms of the marketing and the sales and the business development and positioning yourself in a space where they understand your product or service. But it was never a regulation issue. I think the process is quite simple in the UAE, at least, in terms of what you need to do to start a business. Bamboutique was a little bit more complicated just because it was, we were manufacturing abroad, we were shipping, we had to look at customs, and also originally we were selling online, but actually you need different licenses if you're importing. So Bamboutique was a bit more of a learning curve, which I guess it would be when you go from a service business to a trading business. But again, to actually get into the market, I think it's the marketing that you do, the sales that you do, and honestly, I know I've said it already, but the networking that you do, the support system that you have. Thank you, Omar Nouri. Wish me the best of luck. I appreciate that. Petra, that's a very interesting question. Petra Turkama, is it not a big mess in your life that you own and run so many businesses? Is it not better to own one business in order to give full focus, run smoothly and efficiently? Honestly, sometimes it does feel like a big mess. I'm not gonna lie, but as I mentioned at the very start, I'm a very disciplined and organized person, which means that every business has its time. And there's a lot of synergy between my core business, TI-22 and Dubai on Demand, so they fit in very well together. And Bamboutique is something I fit in on the side. I think if you're an ambitious person and you see opportunities, it's actually more detrimental not to follow through. So I think there's been a number of cases in my life where there's an opportunity I haven't followed through with, and I see that someone else has or it's moved forward. And in my case, I never want to have any regrets. So I would rather, try my best at something and know that I tried and have to work, have to juggle multiple scenarios. But yes, it's a choice. I guess it's not going to work for everybody. But thank you for the question. Thank you, Omar Nouri. Naveed Saeed, where does studying ground reality comes for starting a business on ground? I'm not sure I understood the question, Naveed. If you want to type it again, I'll try and help. Okay. It is indeed an opportunity to learn and evolve, which is what we've seen. I like that a few people agree that it's a cultural perception. So I think Sep Musavi has mentioned she's an interculturalist and a culture coach, and she agrees with the comments that I made. So thank you for that, Sep. Akash Kumar, what's my long-term vision? For me, I'm working on, I have a holding group called Elemental, and within that, I want to have a group of companies that are all synergistic, that are all operating without me, ultimately, like everyone else. You want to get to a point where your business isn't reliant on you, but it's something that you can help grow, and also to keep staying ahead of the trend, ahead of the market, and explore new opportunities. I think it's a bug. If you've got it, you have to keep going. Naveed, if you're going to start a business like a training organization, trading consultation, should studying the market not be part of the plan? Yes, it totally should be part of the plan. Yeah, I have to admit that, our market study was limited on Bamboutique because there also wasn't anyone in the market at the time. So, we looked at the clothing sector, but eco-friendly clothing was very small and there wasn't anyone in bamboo. So it was a decision whether we move forward with something that didn't exist in this market, which at the time felt like a great idea because, no one was in the market, so surely we would stand out and people would come to us. What we underestimated was how we would then need to educate people on what eco-friendly clothing was, what bamboo clothing was, how it felt, which, by the way, for those who haven't felt it, it's incredibly soft. It is by far a superior fabric, but you wouldn't know that unless you actually felt it. So yes, I totally agree, Naveed, that starting any business would involve studying the market. It's just in our case, it was a limited market to study. Thank you, Malik Darwish. Thank you, Raida. I appreciate the comments. Muhammad Al-Kindi again from Abu Dhabi University. He's asked me to elaborate more on win-win scenarios where you counter in your life. Yeah, so I'll give you an example. Perhaps it's easier for me because I'm in the video industry, so I'm always looking for opportunities that I can promote partners. So, for example, I managed to get all my branding done for Dubai On Demand for free. I got it, well, I say for free, but on a barter arrangement, because I could see the gaps in their video strategy and I needed a brand to be designed. So I'm often coming to the table with a win-win scenario where I say to the person, look, I need your expertise and your support in developing my brand, and in exchange, I can offer you video content that is award-winning, high-end, that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. So that's just one example. Similarly, when I do quite a few events just to raise awareness for my businesses, and when I do an event, I happen to have friends who are owners of AV companies and entertainment companies and, web companies and stand companies. And I know Suresh is here as well. So thank you, Suresh, for all of your support. But I have some D2E media if anyone ever needs a stand. In that situation, what I offer is visibility. So in my events, I often have a large audience and I have a mailing list, and there are obviously visibility opportunities at the event itself, having the logo, having the brand, giveaway speaking opportunities, have your suppliers get on stage, address the crowd. There's so many things you can do. But I think if you explore all the possible areas that, your partners and suppliers and colleagues can benefit, and find something that works for you and works for them is what I meant. Akash Kumar, what's my take on businesses failing in today's scenario because of the COVID situation? What advice do you have to these businessmen? again, as I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just basing it off my experience and what I'm going through right now and what I know a lot of business owners are. And I genuinely feel that now is the time to go back to basics and brainstorm and figure out what your next product is and what your next service is and your next offering, and keep moving forward. The minute you stop, then that's it. You need to keep moving. So literally from, I would say 3-4 weeks ago when things were starting to look, downwards, our whole team have been like brainstorming new ideas, and every couple of days we've got a new package that we're experimenting with. And yes, they may not all be things you're very excited about, but right now it's all about test and learn. So, you put a new idea out there, test it. As I mentioned earlier, you can test new ideas very easily these days. So I think, keep testing and come out with something new. It's a challenge. Petra seems very concerned about my time, so would like me to clarify further how I manage multiple businesses along with my private life. I'll be honest, I wouldn't honestly say I have much of a private life. I don't think if you are an entrepreneur, you have a great private life, because I think, I'm always on my phone. You're up to date on what's happening with your business. And as I mentioned, I'm very structured. So, I'll work on certain parts of the business in the morning, I'll work on certain parts in the afternoon, and I save the evening for my non-video business. So, anything video production, because that's actually what brings me revenue, is during the working day. And anything that is additional or new usually happens in the evening or on the weekend. So I teach on the weekend. I run workshops. I tend to run those in the evening or on the weekend. So, anything that doesn't, what I have learned is that I need to prioritize the business, the revenue generating business, the business that is sustaining everything. So for me, TI22 Films, Dubai on Demand, that's the revenue generating business. So that's what I do during the working day. And then off work hours is when I start, playing with Boutique, and weekend is when I'll teach a class or do an event and that type of thing. I hope that clarifies it a bit. Jennifer from Young Arab Leaders, lovely to see you, Jennifer. She asks, what should be an entrepreneur's deciding factor in considering that her startup is a failure? Positivity is key, but based on experience, when should someone say stop and move on? So as I mentioned earlier, I don't think anything is ever a failure. I think they're all steps on your journey, but I do think you need to start looking at your pocket and your bank account. So, the point where it is no longer financially viable for you to continue is where you really need to stop, and hopefully you've stopped before you got to that point. But I don't really think of it as stop. I think of it as pause. So, and that's happened to me twice. Like Boutique, we had, very low sales. So to me, that we paused, and hopefully, who knows, this year might be the year it comes back. Same with Dubai on Demand. I had 2 very difficult years, and I had to pause, but, 2018 allowed us to, unpause and get back in action, and it's been growing since then. So yeah, I think it has to be a financial decision based on the viability and how you can continue. Okay. Sana from Abu Dhabi University, how the awards and appreciation can help in growth, personality, and drive to success. To be honest, my awards have helped me a huge amount, because it's, you're perceived, again, perception is reality. You're perceived very differently. It's the minute I tell people we've won New York Festival Awards and you won a Cannes Award, it's you're seen in a very different light. People have a bit more respect for your experience. You're more credible in your space. Even, if I currently, do consulting sessions, I do webinars, I teach, all those things. Having the awards gives me the credibility to do that. And even for the customers that we have, to know that they are being, supported by an award-winning producer, an award-winning company. So I would say that it does a huge amount for, your drive to success, because you don't, it gets a little addictive too, because once you've got there, you you don't want to stop. You need to keep performing at that level. So yeah, I'm a big believer in striving for that. I believe we're approaching the end time, so maybe I just have time for one or two more. Adnan, I'm almost frightened to read. He said, you do not have a question, but you have a comment. We can sustain as entrepreneurs if we have funds and skills to swim in the market ocean. These can be got from real mentors. From my experience, many young entrepreneurs jump into the ocean, without fins. Yeah, without fins and the skills to swim. I agree. But then sometimes when you jump in without fins or the skills is when you actually get the biggest learning. So I definitely jumped in without fins in BAM Boutique and have some of the biggest learnings. Honestly, I would say out of everything I've said, the one thing that I've really stuck to is making sure I sign agreements with everybody. I sign agreement with my cousin, with my brother, with everybody, because it's not about trust. It's about understanding. You know, it's if you have an agreement in place, then at least everyone's on the same page, and it allows you to maintain the relationships that you have. And I would never have had that learning had I not jumped in without my fins. So, but thank you, Adnan, for the comment. Thank you so much for the kind comment, Petra. I appreciate that. So I believe we've come to the end of our time and also the end of our questions. So perfect timing. I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out today and attending the webinar, and also for having some very interesting questions that have put me on my toes. I appreciate that. I'd like to also thank Young Arab Leaders for the opportunity. And please do look into the organization. They've been a very supportive community, and also the Pearl Initiative for hosting these webinars. And with that, I believe we are signing off for today. So thank you all once again.